But so are we hopeless, Professor Kahneman? Is it just hopeless when the big owls of the world keep making these mistakes in the space of recognizing that they're going to make these mistakes? Is it hopeless for us to make these kinds of cognitive errors?
Fairly hopeless.
Okay. Good night. Thanks for coming.
For individuals, I think, pretty hopeless.
Yeah.
And, you know, people do get better with education, but reading this book isn't making anybody think much better.
Is there anything we can do, though, to overcome
Yeah,
that?
I think so. I think primarily organizations can improve the quality of their processes.
Okay.
Individuals, I think it's much more tenuous.
Much more, and the reason for that, just to isolate this, we'll go to organizations here in a moment. I think that the way that you've written about this is that the core reason why we make these mistakes is the perniciousness of overconfidence. Is that it? Are we fundamentally overconfident?
Well, I mean, we're fundamentally overconfident in the sense that we are fundamentally, I think, wired to jump to conclusions and to complete coherent stories, to create interpretations. All of this happens very quickly. We have very little control of it. We have very little control over the quality of the information that goes into it. And so we just understand situations spontaneously, automatically, and that's very difficult to control. Organizations don't think that way. They typically think more slowly, and that gives you a chance to intervene.
There are a couple, but there's a problem with organizations. Let's get to that. And this is what you've been so Professor Kahneman, no longer teaching at Princeton, living in New York, doing a lot of consulting, and consulting to organizations. And as I understand it, the problem in organizations and in their decision-making process isn't one of bias, which is sort of what a lot of this is, but one of noise. Tell us the difference between bias and noise and why it matters.
Yeah, that's actually, you know, when people think about error, we tend to think about biases, you know, systematic errors. But in fact, a lot of the errors that people make is simply noise in the sense that it's random, it's unpredictable, it cannot be explained, there is no accounting for it. And that is most of, I think, many of the problems of the errors of judgment that we make originate not in bias, but originate actually in noise, in unreliability. So let me explain that a little more, because the concept of noise is pretty vague. There is a lot of literature that actually is not well known in the business world, which I find very surprising. There is a lot of literature on how unreliable professional judgment is. You put two professionals, you put the same X-ray in front of radiologists, and about 20% of the time in some experiments, they don't reach the same diagnosis. The amount of variability in people's judgments when you put the same case in front of people is much, much larger than people anticipate. And we know that in a lot of areas. And there is another thing that we know that connects to noise. We know that in general, when you pit professional judgment, even expert judgment, against formulas, algorithms, simple rules that combine information, in general, the rules beat the experts. Actually, the result is this, that about half of the time in half of the studies, the rules beat the experts outright, and in the other half, it's a draw. There is little or no evidence of cases in which expert judgment do better than intelligently constructed formulas.
Okay, it's sort of that's a daunting message to a group of MBAs, but...
And the reason for that, it turns out, is primarily noise. That is, it's not that people are biased. It is just that when you put some data in front of an algorithm, you will always get the same response at the other end. The output will always be the same. When you put the same data in front of an individual on two separate occasions, you're not going to get the same response. And the indications from research are really unequivocal. That's the main reason for the superiority of algorithms over people. in that algorithms are noise-free and people are not.
Give us an example of what noise would be in expert decision making in the case of radiologists or some other expert.
Well, I'll give you an example from a large financial institution in which we've done some research, so that I'm jumping into the
Sure.
kind of consulting experience that you were mentioning. And it's going to be difficult. They have professionals who are making judgments, and I can't tell you the kind of judgments, and you'll see why in a minute. But they're making judgments about quantities which are measured in dollars and in hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the decisions are consequential. It really makes a difference, the number that the individual produces. Now, a typical feature, and that is not uncommon, that happens in many places, is that a single individual typically makes that judgment. And you find that in a lot of places. You find that, among in loan approvals, very frequently you have a single individual approving loans. You find that in insurance companies, an underwriter, a single underwriter can set policies for very expensively. Now, we actually conducted an experiment where materials were presented, were constructed by the professionals themselves or by some respected members of that team, and they presented material that were completely realistic of the kind of judgments that people make. It would be nicer if I could tell you what it is, but you can imagine. It's in the vicinity of what professionals in large financial organizations do. We asked the leaders of that team how much variability they would expect. And the question was straightforward. If you take two people at random, two professionals at random, and they looked at the same case and they produced a number, which is their evaluation of the case, how much in percentages, how much do you expect them to vary relative to, say, the average of their two judgments? Mm-hmm. And you can probably guess the answer because many people give the same answer, somewhere between 5 and 10%.
Okay.
That's what you expect. The answer is between 40 and 60%. It's an order of magnitude more. It's completely different from what anybody expected. And how it comes about that an organization has a huge noise problem and is completely unaware of it, that's an interesting